Hi, Roseman and Sadia. Thank you for coming. Okay, so we're gonna get going. It's already recording.
Yeah,
All right.
only one person.
So thank you everyone for coming, for joining us. Oh, no, I'm still recording. It says on there. Yeah, thank you. All right,
You
so
are
thank you everyone
recording.
for coming. My name is Sadia, and I'm one of the program coordinators at the Kidney Foundation, and really appreciate you guys coming up for this awesome event that we have with these amazing six, I can't stress enough, 6 renal dietitians who are going to be cooking a very delicious dal, dal tadka, and with rice or naan you could have it with, and a side of cucumber salad. So I'm going to pass it on to Arthi and Emily and Katie and Shannon and Sue Carol. Karen. Karen and Margaret. Oh no, okay, so we have a few less. And then we're here with Andrew, one of our volunteers, and Erwin on screen, another volunteer, and our colleague Julia, also from the Kidney Foundation. So during this event, any questions, if you need anything, ask us on the side, and you guys can focus on these lovely individuals. So take it away.
Thanks, Sadia. Thanks, everyone. Hey guys, hi, my name is Arthi. I'm one of the registered dietitians here at St. Michael's Hospital. So really excited to be here today and to have such a great turnout and have all you guys here today as we focus on sharing a recipe that is, as Sadia mentioned, it's Daal Tadka and a Kachumber salad, which is like a cucumber and tomato salad along with some rice. So this is part of the St. Michael's Hospital and Kidney Foundation support group. So huge thank you to the Kidney Foundation too for making this happen. So before we get started, I just want to introduce all of us and all the dietitians. And I think you might know some of the dietitians. So if any of the dietitians are your dietitians, feel free to raise your hand as well. So Emily, do you want to start?
My name is Emily. I previously worked in the transplant and kidney stone.
Katie.
I'm Katie. I currently work in the transplant and kidney stone clinics.
And then back there in the computer is Shannon.
I work in the dialysis center at St. Mike's. Recognize a few of you.
And Carol.
I work in the MCK clinic as well as recognize. Oh yeah.
Thanks, guys. So what we can expect in the next hour or so is that we're going to prepare this really amazing kidney-friendly recipe, and we'll be focusing on it. We focused on a South Asian meal today, as we mentioned. And so one of the great things, yeah.
We've had a request if we could slow down a little bit. We have to be aware of the fact that some of our visitors on online may be a bit hard of hearing.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Do I need to speak louder?
Do you? I think it's more the cadence as opposed to.
Sure.
the
I will
walk.
speak more slowly. I tend to speak fast, so not a problem.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. So we're going to focus on a South Asian recipe that is packed with flavor as well as nutrition. And we'll also be giving you some nutrition tips and tricks along the way. So before we start, I'm just going to start with a few kind of interesting facts about kidney disease, just for everyone to know that are important. So many of you might know some of these things, but 1 in 10 Canadians has kidney disease. That's 4 million people. The leading cause of kidney disease, do you guys know what it is? Diabetes. It's accounting for 38%. 46% of new patients are under the age of 65. And a person can lose more than 50% of their kidney function before any symptoms appear at all. So this is really where nutrition can play an important role because it can help delay the progression of kidney disease. It can also help manage lab values such as your GFR or your potassium or your phosphorus. It can also help manage conditions associated with chronic kidney disease. So helping to manage, thank you, the diabetes or the hypertension or high cholesterol. And so the right kidney-friendly diet can really help you meet your nutritional needs, reduce the workload of your kidney, help maintain any kidney function that you have left, and reduce symptoms like nausea or fatigue or having a bad taste in your mouth. And in fact, there was even a recent study that showed that if you eat a healthy diet that has fruits and vegetables, fish, legumes, whole grains, and fiber, and you cut down on how much red meat, sodium, and refined sugar intake you eat, that this can lead to a reduced mortality or less risk of death in these patients. So there's so many beneficial things that you get from having a healthy, nutritious diet. And what we really kind of want to highlight with this is that a healthy diet can be in any type of cuisine across the world. So we're obviously focusing on a South Asian meal today, but any cuisine can be made into a healthy diet, and they can all be modified to be kidney friendly as well as heart healthy. So just a reminder that regardless of where you're from, you don't have to give up your favorite foods from back home in order to really get a healthy diet that's good for you and that's good for your kidneys. So just speaking a little bit today about dal tadka and kachumber salad with rice. So this is like a really common everyday meal that you would find in an Indian household. So I would typically eat dal tadka when maybe I'm not feeling so well, or if I've come back from traveling and I just want something like simple and hearty and comforting. And that's where like this meal always like represents that comfort for me. It's made with split yellow moong dal beans, which is a type of lentil. So we know lentil is a type of plant. Yeah, you can find it like this in the grocery store. I wonder if I can unpack this a little bit so you can see. But you can find this actually from most grocery stores now would carry this. And it kind of looks, I don't know if you can see, but a little bit like this. I'll show you guys too, a little bit like this in a bag. So it's a plant-based protein. So it's packed with fiber as well as nutrition. Kachumber salad is actually one of my favorite types of meals, especially to recommend to get more vegetables into the diet. Especially in South Asian cuisine, we often cook our vegetables and they're part of like their cooked vegetable sabzi or side dish, but kachumber salad is a great way to get like raw vegetables. And also it's always like packed with flavor because it has that tang from the lime or lemon that you use. And so I always feel like it's a perfect kind of side dish or accompaniment to most or any Indian meal really. And then rice, of course, is one of like the ultimate comfort dishes and like that you can always have. For this dish specifically, we're using basmati rice. And so this is a lower glycemic index rice, which means that it doesn't raise your blood sugars quite as quickly. So it can be really good for somebody who's trying to manage their blood sugars if they have diabetes. We're using white basmati rice today, but you can also always use brown basmati rice. That kind of helps retain that bran and germ layer. It has a lot of fiber in it. So that is also a really good and healthy option to have instead as well. So before we get started, I think we'll just do a little bit of an ingredient review, just so that you can see what everything is and talk a little bit about some of the health benefits of each food. So this is yellow dal, split mung beans. It's split yellow mung beans. That's what it's called. So like I mentioned before, it's a great source of fiber. Can you guys all see this okay? And I'll put this over here so you can see it as well. It's low in fat. It has lots of B vitamins. It has lots of iron in it, and it's also considered a low glycemic index food, so it helps with maintaining your blood sugar control. For the aromatics, we have a few different ones. We have onions and there goes the garlic. We have onions and garlic and ginger and some green chilies and spices over here as well. So just to give you a little bit, so garlic and ginger especially, they have a lot of antioxidants and a lot of anti-inflammatory properties that are really good for you. In terms of the vegetables, we have some of them over here, but we have some tomatoes and we also have some cucumbers. So tomatoes, as you know, they're a great source of vitamin C. They also contain antioxidants from lycopene, which gives it its red color. In terms of the cucumber is 95% water, so really good for hydration. It also is low in calories and also high fiber, similar to the tomato. So in terms of spices, we have a lot of spices over here too. So one of my favorite ones is turmeric. It's like bright yellow spice. I actually used it yesterday and my fingernails are still yellow from it. So just remember when you use it to be a little bit careful or wash your hands right afterwards. But it has a really powerful antioxidant called curcumin, which has really powerful anti-inflammatory properties specifically. So really good for like other conditions. It's known to help things like arthritis, for instance, as well. And then over here we have some cumin seeds. So this is also like rich in iron and calcium and magnesium. We have some black pepper and some, there's some other cumin as well, and a little bit of chili pepper there as well. So last but not least, we also have salt. So yes, dietitians do include salt in their meals as well. So I think it's important to know that, salt is a major source of sodium, and we all know this helps with blood pressure regulation, but too much can be an issue. So it's really about having it in moderation so that it's not adverse effects. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later on as well. And then lastly, we have some green chilies, which are optional. We don't have to include this in our meal. It depends how spicy you like things. But they're rich in vitamin A and vitamin C, and also has antioxidants. Oh, and the last thing is the canola oil. So you can use many different types of oils. We use canola oil today. It's low in saturated fats. It's high in monounsaturated fat. So it's a heart healthy type of diet. So that's sort of it for me from the ingredients, and I will pass it on to.
Thank you. Thanks, Darcy. All right, so now is the time many of us are here to get cooking, enjoy some of this food. So we're going to begin with the yellow Daal Tadka.
Emily? Hi, sorry to interrupt you. Just a gentle reminder to
Slow down.
slow down a little bit, please.
No
Thanks
problem.
so much.
You probably saw us hand sanitizing. We also did wash our hands before we got here with warm soap and water. Food safety is important when we have kidney disease, and Katie's going to talk a little bit about that as well. But in order to get started with our dal, the first thing we actually have to do is rinse our mung dal. So the purpose of rinsing our lentils is it actually helps to get some of any dirt or any little rocks or stones that might have been found in the processing of it out, but also can help to start the cooking process. And in this recipe, as RV mentioned, we are going to use a little bit of salt, but because we are dietitians, we've also modified the amount of salt in it. So remembering that with kidney disease, it's not a no salt diet. It's really about being aware of how much we're having. So the recipe does have the nutrition information on them. So those will also be helpful. I'm going to put the 2 cups. So I'm actually going to double the recipe because we have such a big crowd here today, which is amazing. So I'm doing two cups of the lentil. You're going to do half a teaspoon of salt. So the lentils are going to take about 20 minutes to cook. So while we're doing that, we're going to talk a little bit about protein. So who here has heard that word protein? Yeah. Has anyone tried lentils before? Yeah. How often do you have them?
I do kind of regular because I make dal.
You make dal?
Yeah.
Oh, well, hopefully this is still a new recipe for you to try. What kind of dal do you make?
I use all the different ones.
All different ones. And that's the nice part about dal is there are so many different varieties of it. Yeah. So dal or lentils are a plant-based protein. Who here has ever tried a vegetarian? Yeah, couple, great. So protein is the building block of our body. It helps keep our muscles strong. It keeps our bones nice and strong. It helps us fight infection. And with kidney disease, too much or too little is not good. And how much we need depends on which stage of kidney disease we have. I'm going to do that. Bring this back. So that we get a better sense, who here is in the MCKC clinic or free dialysis? Okay. Perfect. Who's on dialysis? And who's had a transplant? Okay, thanks for being here. So protein is found in things like meat, fish, chicken. Those are called animal-based protein. We also get protein from things like lentils and chickpeas and hummus and tofu and nuts and seeds and peanut butter. And those are called plant-based proteins. And when our body uses protein, whether it be animal or plant-based, it produces a waste. And sometimes that's why we see the creatinine values increasing if we're having too much protein. But too little protein can make our muscles. So that's where our dietitian team can help you find out how much you should be having. And there's benefits to having both different types of protein in our diet, but we know the biggest benefit is having those plant-based proteins in our diet, especially for those who may also have heart disease or diabetes or be working towards any weight management goals. The plant-based proteins can also help with that. Now, to put it into perspective, because depending on our stage of kidney disease, we might be needing more or less protein. So someone on dialysis or just quickly right after transplant needs a lot of protein. And when we have about a size of chicken or fish, that's about this much. So about 3 ounces, that's about 21 grams of protein. When we have about a quarter of a cup of things like nuts or seeds, that's about 4 grams of protein. And things like chickpeas or lentils, half a cup has about 7 grams of protein. So plant-based proteins, they have less protein per serving. So depending on if you're in pre-dialysis, having those types of protein sources may be helpful to preserve your kidney function. Who here has heard the word beans? What about legumes? These are often used interchangeably to describe things like peas or things in the beans or legume family. And legumes are this big category, which includes things like black beans and kidney beans and chickpeas and lentils. So whether you say beans or legumes, it all means the same thing. But as RP mentioned, they're really good sources of things like B vitamins and folate and fiber and this plant-based protein. You can use them in things like soups or stews or stir fries or dal recipes. Where are using dried beans today? When you've had beans, have they ever been right? So soaking our dried beans can actually help to reduce the amount of potassium in them. Whereas canned beans, like canned lentils or chickpeas, they naturally will have less potassium. So there are ways that we can certainly include these, and we should be including these into our diet when we have kidney disease. To put it into perspective, canned lentils, if you were to soak them, because you can still soak your canned lentils, for 12 hours and then cook them for a few minutes, they actually only have 6 milligrams of potassium in 1 cup. Whereas the dried ones, if you soak them for 12 hours and then cook them for 30 minutes, we're only going to cook them for 20 minutes today. They go from 772 milligrams of potassium all the way to 81 milligrams. So yeah, how we prepare our foods allows us to incorporate a variety of things in our diet when we have kidney disease. So, I think one of the big things are gone are the days where there's a lot of no's. we have kidney disease. So we should be incorporating a variety of foods in our diet. When we store our lentils or any of our dried beans, storing them in an airtight container in the cupboard in a cool or a dry place, they can be stored for 1 year. If you have already cooked them, you're going to want to cook them and refrigerate them within 2 hours of cooking. So we don't want to leave them on the counter once we've prepared them. And the dried lentils that have been cooked and we've now put them in our fridge, we want to consume them within 5 days, or you can actually freeze them for 6 months. And that makes it be a really quick and easy meal some days for you, right? If the protein is already cooked, we can just mix it into whatever we're looking for. But try to label it with the date so that you don't forget when you put them in the freezer. The canned ones, of course, when we buy any canned goods, we want to make sure that there's no dents on them, that they're not leaking or cracked or have that bulging lid. And if we are buying our canned goods, of course, keep them in that cool, dry place as well. And after you rinse them or open them and rinse them, make sure you put them in a container, an airtight container in the fridge. But the canned ones, they're only going to last about 3 or 4 days. So they don't last as long as the dried ones. So those are kind of 2 different things to keep in mind when you are choosing whether you want dried or canned ones. Rinsing them actually also helps to get out some of that flatulence. So helps to break down the enzymes. So if you've ever had some beans and you felt, maybe it bothered your tummy or you felt like you had a lot of gas afterwards, rinsing them helps to get that process started so that we don't have that effect. When we think about protein, it's important to know the right amount of protein for you. So that exact amount depends on a few things. It depends on your weight, your height, your activity level, what stage of kidney disease you have, any other health conditions you have. And that's where our dietitian team is really here to help you in your clinics. If you're before dialysis or you're in the MCKC clinic, trying to have a vegetarian meal once a day can be really helpful for the kidney. If you need to limit your portion of animal protein, using that palm is a really good measure because we live in a world where often we think things are bigger are better, right? And regardless of what stage we're in, trying to incorporate more of the vegetarian protein. So maybe you do a meatless Monday or something like that. And then if you are taking protein powder, making sure you're speaking with your dietitian to make sure that they're appropriate for you. So I'm just watching the clock here to make sure we don't go over 20 minutes while we're letting this simmer. But in the meantime, I'm going to start the Kachumber salad. So we'll talk a little bit about vegetables as well, and then I'll give myself a break and Katie will come and talk in a second. So who here likes vegetables? Good, amazing. So to make the Kachumber salad, we are going to actually be using some cucumbers. So I have washed these ahead of time. And as we will get ready to put these in our salad, we'll talk a little bit about vegetables. So of course, vegetables, they give us lots of fiber. One of the concerns often is that they sometimes have things like potassium. And cucumbers are actually a low potassium vegetable, which is great. They, also as Arthi mentioned, have a lot of water in it. So for this, we are going to chop up the cucumber into kind of bite-sized pieces, and then I'll put it in the mixing bowl here.
Is it true that the classmates in this? And I generally peel it too.
So some people will peel any of the vegetables, and there is potassium there, but there's still some potassium in vegetable itself. It's difficult to know how much gets removed when we peel it though. Does anyone have another thought?
I guess not peeling it, it's the fiber.
Right, exactly.
You're gonna lose that fiber.
So what I do is actually just peel strips off of it.
Like,
Leave some of it.
Do every other one or so? Yeah,
It looks nice though.
it does.
I did have a potato peeler somewhere in one of my bags, but I didn't grab it, sorry.
What I will think since growing up is when you cut the top of the cucumber, you just rub it. The piece you cut off, you put it back on and you rub it for a little while.
Yeah.
And it makes like a little white foam. And you take that off. I don't know.
How did that
use?
Really?
Yes,
I don't know if it takes out something.
yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
I didn't know that.
It's a little trick. I can't remember the reason I did. I
Yeah.
did that all the time as well.
Yeah. you
Just rubbed it on the
Rub it,
end.
rub it, rub it, rub it.
Just rubbed it and cut off the front.
Just over that piece and
Really? That's so interesting. I want to know why. I'll have to look that up after.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that either.
I don't know if it draws whatever is there, it comes up.
Yeah,
But it comes up on that white foam.
indeed.
Oh,
Cool.
interesting.
And with the dal, just put like, because clove is pungent, you put 1 grain or 2, depends on the amount. And when you make it dal, you just put, depends on the peas you use, you just put a hint of sugar. But the clove keeps from the gassy.
Oh, amazing. See, this is why we do these types of events so that we can share our knowledge and share things. I always joke whenever I'm cooking in front of people, it's not a good sight when I have a knife and I really need to take a knife cooking skills course. So
Can you repeat the rubbing business? I don't think anybody heard.
yeah, so one of our audience members was sharing that when she was a child, her mother used to rub the end of the cucumber on the end and it produces a white foam. We haven't heard of that, but we're happy to look into it and see what that is doing.
So I just looked it up.
Oh,
first.
right.
We'll skip to that. So the question was, the rubbing. So when you rub the ends, sprinkling the salt helps in extracting the white milky fluid that contains the cucurbitacins.
He says the bitterness.
Diticins.
Yes. Amazing.
So, yeah.
I love learning. This is
So it makes the cucumber less bitter.
okay. Amazing. So vegetables, they're definitely part of the plants that we eat. And, some of the most common ones are obviously cucumber or things like broccoli or cabbage, cauliflower. One of my favorite questions is what is your favorite vegetable? So if you're here, maybe you could let us know that. Butternut squash, okay. Eggplant.
Eggplant.
Corn.
Paper.
Okay.
Pepper.
Okra and eggplant.
Oh, we have 2 eggplants.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Kale.
Brussels sprouts? Anyone in the chat there want to share your favorite vegetable with us? The thing with vegetables is there's not any right or wrong thing, right? They all have the cell walls. They all have antioxidants that help fight inflammation. They help with fiber and vitamins, and they help our body to run optimally. So having a variety of them or a rainbow of colors can help us to get those different nutrients that we need in the body. So having a favorite one is great. I think that allows us to want to eat those a bit more, but trying to choose those rainbow of things, right? Things like the red and orange and green and yellow and purple and white vegetables. That way we get all of the different vitamins. And essentially then we get those antioxidants, which help to protect our cells from disease, help us to fight inflammation, and also help to keep our brain and our body working very well. Most Canadians, and especially kidney patients, we actually don't eat enough fiber. And so that is why keeping the skins on this salad is helpful. For women, we need about 25 grams of fiber per day, and men need about 38 grams of fiber per day. And of course, fiber helps to keep us full. It helps to give us helps the microbiome in our gut to make good prebiotics in there to help us stay healthy. And also vegetables are generally low in sugar, right? So they often help to control our blood sugars because of the fiber, and they don't cause any spike. And they're low in salt, right? Mm-hmm. So they're the ones that are fresh are naturally low in salt, whereas if we're having frozen, they're actually ones that are peak cooked, frozen at their peak ripeness, and can be included in our diet. And they're just as nutritious as the fresh one. Canned is also fine, but we just want to make sure we're looking for the no added salt one. And we can rinse the canned ones as well to help get any of the salts too. With vegetables, I mentioned that potassium work.
Seeing that tomato,
Mhm.
there and limits for people.
We're going to talk about that right now. So one of the big words with vegetables is that potassium work. And so we often get concerned if kidney patients have too much potassium in their blood, because that can not be good for our heart and change the beat of our heart. So if you're told to follow a low potassium diet, that means keeping it less than 2,000 milligrams of potassium per day. But what does that actually look like? So this Daal that we're making, that has about 215 milligrams of potassium in it. So if we think about our daily budget, that's only about 10%, right? Whereas the Kachumber salad has about 330 milligrams of potassium. And this Roma tomato, so it's a pretty big size, it actually has 216 milligrams of potassium. But if we chose a little smaller one, the medium has 292, whereas a small one has 216. So even among the size of some of the foods that we choose, that can impact how much potassium we get. So the answer of how many tomatoes you can have per week, it really depends. Depends on what else you're eating and the size you're having, right? So we often will say, you could put a couple cherry tomatoes every day on your salad, and that would be fine. But if you're making like tomato sauce or having a tomato soup, you're going to get a lot more tomato in that than just a couple. So without knowing your blood work, our dietitians, when you see them in clinic, can give you a bit more specific answers of how much. But there shouldn't be foods that we need to avoid. It's really about portion size.
Question in the class. Okay.
Yeah.
With a lot of crosstalk, sound they playing, what's the short summary of the results? I think it's just, I don't think this person still hear us clear. Sure. I think she just wanted to separate the conversation.
Yeah, people are talking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I did the one about the
Yeah. So.
cucumber. So our lentils are almost ready here. The only other thing I wanted to talk a bit about was salt, because that is also one of the things that we've been using today too. And then I'll start cutting the onion and we'll get Katie to chit chat a bit. So salt is sodium, right? And when we have kidney disease, we really want to be keeping it to less than 2,300 milligrams of salt per day. And that's the same amount as in 1 teaspoon. So that's salt from everything. That's salt we get when we're cooking. That's salt we get from our bread and our milk and our cheese and any packaged foods. And so reading the food labels can be really important when we are trying to control our salt intake. If we have too much salt, we can get swelling on our body. Our blood pressure might be high. We can read recipes too to see how much salt is in that, and that allows us to modify things. And you actually can adjust a recipe by about 25 to 50% of the salt without noticing any change in the flavor. And one of the things that we like to do with cooking is adding in these herbs and spices that gives us that flavor without the salt. So things like our turmeric and chili and cumin that we're going to be adding as well, or lemon juice, limes, vinegars, and you could even use flavored oils to also add in some flavor too. 1/3 of the amount of dried herb is the same as 1 teaspoon of fresh herbs. So sometimes we don't have, we're going to use the fresh coriander today, but if you didn't have it, you could use the dried as well. Same with things like basil or rosemary. But different herbs go so well with different types of foods. So things like in rice, you could do things like chives or garlic or parsley to give it a little bit of different flavor, and really help you to control the amount of salt. Like we used a bit in the lentils today, but in terms of an entire portion, you're still only getting 500 milligrams of salt in a whole meal portion of both of these recipes. So it's still really low. I'm going to keep cutting the onion, but I will probably cry while that is happening. So I'm going to let Katie start talking.
Does anyone have any good tricks for not crying when cutting onions? I've heard different things, but I haven't found anything that actually works.
Put a spoon in your mouth.
A spoon? Okay, I haven't
Okay.
heard that one yet. I'll
Turn it upside down and hold it in your mouth.
At home, I have to wear ski goggles.
I do that sometimes too.
This is what I'm
comment.
Yes.
Did you choose your recipes because you are cooking in season?
You know what? Arthi chose the recipe.
And also, the meals are, the choice is really great because from a cost savings perspective,
All of these things.
very budget friendly.
Certainly, you know, all of the ingredients, we're all going to get to try it. There's definitely a lot of us here. This only costs $30 to make, right? So, and we're going to get a lot of serving.
Okay, you may have noticed in the background, we have the rice cooker going, cooking away for us. So today we're using basmati rice in our recipe. And of course, rice is a grain that's a staple in many, many cultures around the world. You can get rice in different varieties, long grain, medium grain, short grain. When rice is being processed, it's milled to remove the outer layer of the rice. So it removes the hull, which is the inedible outer layer of the rice. Depending how much gets removed, you're going to get either brown rice or white rice. So that's the difference there. So for brown rice, they only remove the hull, the outer layer, and they leave the rest of the grain intact. So that's why we call brown rice a whole grain, because you have the entire grain. And that includes the bran and the germ as well. And that's where a lot of the nutrition is found, including fiber. When you get white rice, you're removing the bran and the germ. And so you're removing some, not all, but some of the nutrition as well. So some of those nutrients that get removed are things Emily's already talked about, like potassium. Another nutrient that gets removed in that process is phosphorus, which you may be familiar with as well. How many people have heard about phosphorus? So these are minerals that are in many of our foods. And for some people on a kidney diet, you may be limiting these nutrients. For other people on a kidney diet, you may have been asked to increase these nutrients. But as Emily mentioned, it's not that we want to avoid these. Depending on your needs, you may just need to eat more or less of certain foods. And if you've ever been told, you know, avoid brown bread, brown rice, whole grains, that's not really a recommendation we often like to make anymore. Because if we're looking at the nutrition of these grains, so let's compare, for example, white rice, which is what we're using today, and brown rice. If you're looking at the potassium content of this, a cup of brown rice will have about 90 milligrams of potassium, whereas a cup of white rice would have about 60 milligrams of potassium. So it is less, but it's not a huge difference, especially if, as Emily mentioned, we might have a budget on a low potassium diet of about 2,000 milligrams per day. If we're looking at the phosphorus as well, brown rice is much higher in phosphorus. A cup will have about 170 of phosphorus, a cup of brown rice. But what we know about the phosphorus in whole grain is it has a lower bioavailability. So it has a bioavailability of about 50%, meaning your body can only absorb about half of the phosphorus in that brown rice or that whole grain. So even if you're eating a whole cup of brown rice with about 170 milligrams of phosphorus, you're not going to take all of that in because it's not all bioavailable. If you see a package of white rice that says enriched, what that means is they've added some nutrients back into it. So we know that when they're processing white rice, they remove some of the nutrients. So enriched just means they've added back some vitamins, some minerals to it. So if you ever see that, that's what that means. Other differences between white rice and brown rice. White rice cooks much quicker compared to brown rice. This is why I often cook with white rice. It's much, much faster. But brown rice, whereas white rice might take about 20 minutes, brown rice, it might take about a little bit longer. And again, that's just because brown rice has less of the kind of layers removed from it. So it's a bit firmer. So today we are using our rice cooker for convenience. How many people use a rice cooker at home? They say me too. I love cooking with a rice cooker because it's so easy. You can throw everything in the pot, turn it on, and leave the room or do a cooking demo and not have to pay attention to it. Of course, you can use the stove as well. You have to kind of keep an eye on it a little bit more. Generally, when you're cooking rice, whether in a pot or in a rice cooker, usually most types of rice need about a 2-to-1 water to rice ratio. So 1 cup rice, 2 cups water. Does anyone have a different ratio they think they like to use, or?
That's universal.
Pardon?
That's universal.
It's universal. Okay, I was just checking. I don't want to give bad rice cooking advice. I've heard some people say put your finger in the pot and do. Yes. Okay. That one never worked for me. For me, I need to do the 2-to-1. Okay. Most recipes for rice might call to add some salt. So like we said, we're not eliminating salt from the diet, but we're maybe using less. So you can certainly add a pinch of salt to your rice. I really like to add fennel seeds to my rice. Has anyone tried that before? It really adds some nice flavor. Other good combos for rice are a mix of garlic, cilantro, and lime juice. I see a nod there. You like that too? Okay. Yeah.
What about coconut milk?
Coconut milk is also delicious in rice. Yes. Is that what you add to yours? Yeah, sometimes. I do that sometimes too. It tastes really good. So that could be used as your liquid.
I put the moong dal in the rice too.
Aha. So that's another one of my favorite things to do with rice too, is add some legumes. So you put the moong dal right into the rice.
Yeah, there's no way to put it out. It doesn't get too soft.
Good, yeah. So I almost always, when I'm using my rice cooker, I'll put in the rice, put in the water, and then I like to add a can of beans or a can of chickpeas, and it just cooks right in the rice cooker with it. So this is pardon?
At the beginning?
Right at the beginning, yeah. And because they're canned beans, they're already quite soft, so they don't really get, overcooked in the 20 minutes. And it's a really convenient way to get more plant-based protein in your food. Emily talked about how we always want to add more plant-based protein. So that's a really easy way to do it. That wouldn't necessarily be enough protein for your whole meal, but it can make a really good side dish. It also really increases the fiber content in your rice. So again, if we're comparing white rice to brown rice, the fiber content will be a little bit different. So brown rice will have about 3 grams of fiber per cup compared to white rice, which has about 1 gram of fiber per cup. Does that mean you can't use white rice? Absolutely not. You can continue using white rice, but if you're looking for ways to increase the fiber, adding some legumes is a good way. How's it going over there, Emily?
It's going pretty well. We're gonna use the chopper for a bit while we do the onions and then also the rest of the tomatoes, because I think our lentils are getting done.
Oh, okay. I guess I will talk over the chopper.
Yeah, we'll give a minute here while we do this and then we can continue talking. Who cooks with different aromatics like onions or garlic?
I do a lot.
Yeah, what about ginger?
So, is,
Yeah, I just learned that you're not supposed to put your potatoes and your onions in the same basket when they're in the dark.
I always do that. That's okay.
is it, can I ask a question? Is it because of, it gives off that sulfur from one to the next or something like that?
Yeah,
I
it
don't
makes
know.
the onions
Yeah.
sprout.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, apparently they're, I mean, we know they're friends in cooking, but they're not good friends when when we have them in the cupboard.
Story.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So, rice, of course, is a carbohydrate. Has anyone ever heard anything about carbohydrate, good or bad? What do you hear about carbohydrate?
If you're on a diet.
Okay.
You can skip carbs. Some people need it. People have to be balanced.
Okay. Yeah.
I heard a rule that have a regular carbohydrate, which is like white bread, white rice, which is it spells itself very fast.
Aha.
So the glycemic index rises very quick when you eat that. And then the complex is like the brown rice or something with a lot more grain content, and that it doesn't spike your glycemic index so fast because the body takes a little longer time to process it and break it down.
Yes, that's a really good point. And sorry, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Same thing. Yeah, so some people may need to pay more attention to maybe the type of carbohydrate they choose or the amount of carbohydrate they choose. But carbohydrate definitely do not need to be removed from your diet. They are a part of a healthy, balanced, kidney-friendly diet.
I remember.
So,
Thank you. Oh, that made
so carbohydrates are nutrients, which are a source of energy for the body. And when they break down, they turn into glucose in the body, which can raise blood sugar. Carbohydrates are things like starchy food, like breads, pasta, rice, grains, starchy vegetables like potato and corn, even legumes like lentils contain carbohydrate, and also fruit, milk, and any type of sugar, white sugar, brown sugar, honey, maple syrup are all carbohydrate as well. So we've been talking a bit about fiber in the presentation in this demo today, and carbohydrates can definitely be a really good source of fiber in the diet, depending on the ones you're choosing. So why do we want more fiber? What does fiber do for us? It helps with digestion, right? Helps keep you regular. Fiber also lowers risk of heart disease. It lowers the risk of certain types of cancers like colon cancer. And it helps keep you full as well. So there are many different high fiber carbohydrates to choose from, things like whole grain bread, whole grain pasta, fruit, vegetables, oats. These will all contain a lot of fiber. When we're looking at the type of carbohydrate we're choosing, we can consider also the glycemic index, which I heard mentioned over here. So I'm glad to hear a lot of you have already heard about the glycemic index. So the glycemic index, it measures how quickly different carbohydrates will raise your blood sugar. So something as a high glycemic index like white bread, that would raise your blood sugar more quickly than a low glycemic index food, like more of a whole grain bread or a sourdough bread would be lower glycemic index. So that doesn't mean you can't eat foods that are high glycemic or medium glycemic, but for people who are keeping an eye on their blood sugar, choosing lower glycemic food can be a really good tool to enjoy your carbohydrate without it raising your blood sugar quite as much as some other foods. So today, do you need to go?
You can finish your thought.
Okay. Today we're using white basmati rice, which is a medium glycemic index rice. Certain other rices like minute rice, instant rice, or jasmine rice would be higher glycemic index. And other rices like parboiled rice would be low glycemic index. So parboiled rice, it may also be called converted rice. It's a type of rice where it's partially pre-cooked in the processing in the hull, the outer layer that eventually gets removed. So what this does is it just keeps some of the nutrition inside during the processing instead of being removed.
Not worse, more processed than.
So, it's still, all rice is processed, but just in the way it's processed, it does help to preserve some of the nutrients. Yeah.
So in the recipe, it says to grate the tomatoes. I'm just going to use them in the chopper for the sake of time.
I have a question.
Of course.
Which is the onion you're using? I see you have the white skin one. Is that the sweet one?
That is not the sweet one, just a regular white onion. I'm going to talk about them in a second too.
So much faster than chopping. Okay, so we know we're not avoiding rice or carbohydrates on a kidney diet, but we should pay attention to how much we're having. So if you're thinking about a meal, what percentage of your plate would you want the rice to be or the carbohydrate to be in your meal? What do you think?
1/4.
A quarter, 1/4. You've all spoken with dietitians before. Great. Yes, so that's important. We don't need to remove the rice from our plate, but we're getting it the right balance, the right portions. So about a quarter of our plate from the carbohydrate, about a quarter of our plate from protein, and then we want lots of vegetables, or about 50% of our plate from vegetables like these. Other ways we can use our hands to measure our food. I know Emily looked at protein using our palm size. Rice, we can use our fist and aim for about a fist size, which is about a cup. How are your
Somebody's
The only microphone that's on is Andrew's. Everybody else is muted. And Andrew's microphone is the sound in the room.
Okay, thank you for you can just try to hold it. There we go. So we are going to start to cook the dal now. So the first thing we're doing is just warming up our pan. And we're, as Arthur mentioned, using canola oil today. Canola oil is a higher temperature cooking oil. And I think a lot of questions I hear is like, I thought canola oil was not healthy for us. It's quite processed. You can get a pure canola oil. Other types of oils like avocado or walnut, they have similar types of eating profile, but also the health benefits like the omega-3s in it. Olive oil, unfortunately, doesn't cook at the high temperature that we need it to be cooked at for today. So in this recipe, we are actually only using 1.5 tablespoons to cook the lentils. So put a little bit in our pot here. And then we're going to start with the onions. So we are using the 2 different types of onions. The first one is the red onion, which will be cooked with the lentil. So red onions and white onions, the big difference is that they just offer a different flavor profile compared. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Just a question to park on the side, since we've been talking about the different components of that are in the ingredients. We have a question regarding calories, fat, protein, differences between potassium and phosphorus, basically how to read nutritional labels. If there's some time to discuss that, could you consider doing that?
Of course. I have a lovely label for basmati rice right here, so we can certainly cover that.
Thank you.
Any of us would be happy to do that. So sorry, here come the tears from the onions. As I was saying, so the onions, they basically all have the same nutrition profile. It's really just a matter of what type of flavor you're looking for. So the dal uses the red onion, and then our salad is using a white onion. There's also things like shallots, which have a lot more of a mild taste, or the sweet onion that our friend here in the audience was asking about earlier. So once our onions are heated, we're going to start to add some of our spices. So this recipe is using cumin seeds. So these are cumin seeds. And we need to put in a teaspoon here.
You can smell it all over the kitchen.
The onion is very potent. Hoping we don't have any smoke alarm.
For us, it smells great. For you, it's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we're just gonna let this cook for a quick minute here, get all the lovely smell out. And then our next step is actually to add in our garlic, ginger, and tomato in here. So ginger I love because it is a great aromatic to add into our diet. It can certainly be added in as, chopped up, grated. You can also get it in the little containers already taken care of, which can be a quick time saver. But with ginger, it's really important that we get the outside off of it. So this side, you can either use a potato peeler or a knife, depending on how good your knife skills are.
I freeze my ginger and I grate it.
Oh,
And
great.
The peel seems to separate from it. It's really neat.
Amazing. So someone here in the audience was saying that they freeze their ginger and it's much easier for them to use. That is a great trick. I will definitely have to take that.
I just, when I wash the ginger, I just soak it on and I just take it by the knife here, knife and I scrape it.
And you scrape it. Yeah.
That's good.
Some people will use a spoon as well. Yes. To scrape the ginger off is another really nice. Okay. So as I'm just putting in all of these ingredients into the pot, we're going to continue cooking that. And then the next part is just adding in the lemon juice and the seasonings into our Kachumber salad, and then we'll get to eat. So Katie probably has some more things for us to chat about.
That does smell so good. So we're making big batches of everything today, which is great because we have a big crowd. But if you're cooking for, 1 or 2 people at home, you might want to be storing your food for leftovers to eat the next day, or even to freeze to eat next week or next month. So anytime we're preparing, cooking, or storing food, we need to be paying attention to food safety to make sure our food doesn't make us sick or give us any food poisoning or foodborne illness. This is important for everyone, of course, but definitely important for people and for anyone who has a lowered immune system, or for people who take medications that lower their immune system. So that might be someone, for example, receiving cancer treatment, or for our people who have had kidney transplants. So first step, we always want to make sure everything is clean. So we saw Emily said we washed our hands, keeping everything washed, like clean surfaces, clean cutting boards, even washing our reusable grocery bags, things like that. We know we washed all our fruits and vegetables at the beginning. Like Emily said, we don't need any soap or special cleaning product for our fruits and vegetables. Just clean water is enough. And what we don't want to do is soak our fruits and vegetables in a sink full of water. As clean as your kitchen is, your sink probably has bacteria in it. All kitchen sinks do. So the bacteria from the sink is going to go and get transferred onto your food. So we don't want to soak in a kitchen sink. If you're prepping vegetables with a harder skin, like a potato or a carrot, you can use a firm brush to scrub it. Otherwise, just water works. Today we're cooking a vegetarian meal, so temperature-wise, we're maybe not being quite as careful as we would if we're cooking something like meat or chicken. When we're cooking those, having a meat thermometer is a helpful tool just to make sure you're cooking everything to the right temperature. Okay, and so if we're storing our leftovers, most important thing is that we're not leaving things out on the counter for hours or for the afternoon or overnight. After about 2 hours, bacteria is going to start to form in your food, which can make you sick. That's, for room temperature. If we're in a hotter environment, or it's summertime, or we're outside, probably you want to keep it to about an hour, because we know bacteria will grow quicker in hot temperatures. When you're cooling your food, you want to make sure, I was just checking my rice cooker, it looks like it's done. You want to cool in shallow containers so that it cools faster. If you're cooling in like a big container like the rice cooker, maybe the outside is going to get cold, but the inside might stay quite hot for a while. So shallow containers help things cool down faster and more evenly. And then you want to put it in an airtight container, label it with the date, put it in the fridge, put it in the freezer. If you're keeping things in the fridge, like a meal like this, you don't want to keep it for more than maybe about 3 to 4 days, especially something like rice. But in the freezer, it will be able to stay good for a few months. When you're reheating your leftovers, if you're taking it from the freezer, take it out of the freezer, put it in the fridge, let it thaw first. And then anytime you're reheating some leftovers, you just want to make sure it's heated to a hot, safe temperature so that we're getting rid of any bacteria that might be in there. And that's usually about 74 degrees Celsius. Or if you were reheating something like lentils that has the liquid in it, until it boils, then you can be sure that got a hot, safe temperature. We also don't want to be reheating the same leftovers more than once, because that's just more chance that it's going to be, kept at an unsafe temperature for too long of a time. things like fruits and vegetables, for example, if you have whole tomatoes, whole apples, we can keep those stored out in the open. We don't need to keep them in the fridge. But once they're chopped or processed or prepared, like our lovely salad here, we're just gonna want to keep it in the fridge. That looks delicious.
Yeah, we're almost getting there. So we have our tomatoes, our onion, our ginger, our turmeric, our cumin seeds, and our chili powder. I opted for no green chilies in this. So I'm sure there's probably people who can handle some spicier, but just for the vast majority of us, we'll leave it on the mild side today. But to show you the green chilies, so typically they're just little ones. They do different types of chilies have different types of heat, and I know these ones look like they're just small and probably not going to do a lot of damage, but the smaller ones tend to pack a lot more punch than the bigger ones. So we'll hold off on that if that's okay with everyone. But as we get to finish off our lovely Kachumber salad here, I will just bother your ears for a few more minutes. So inside here, I have our cucumber, our tomato, our onion. We opted for no green chili. We have our coriander leaves, which is actually just cilantro. So if you are not a cilantro lover, there is some in here. And then we're going to actually put in some salt. So we were talking about that salt and you know, that 1 teaspoon of salt per day. This recipe, getting excited over here. This recipe, which will make about 4 servings, I've doubled it because we have a large group. So traditionally, it would only have 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt in that little recipe. And remember that you're gonna then have 1/4 of that 1/8. So math on the top of my head here is not good, but I would assume that is 1/16 of a teaspoon. And that is really kind of a good little standing point. We're also going to put lemon juice. So I love lemon juice as a nice flavoring in our salads. You could certainly juice a lemon. These things are just as nutritious. So if you like using the lemon or the lime in the liquid form, you just have to remember that you need to put it in the refrigerator after it's opened. So give it a quick little shake, and then we should be good. Who uses different lemon or lime in their cooking? Yeah, do you have a preference? Lemon? Yep. Whatever you have. And sometimes also orange. Orange zest is another nice way of adding in some citrus. Grapefruits, depending on which medications you're on. So this recipe also has dried cumin. So what I love about spices, dried spices, is you can pick them up at the bulk store, you can pick them up at the dollar store. They stay in the cupboard for almost a year, keeping them in a little container, whether it be the one that they came in or the plastic bag. But they're such a good flavor pack into our food. And there's so many different options for using them. Some of my favorite are things like rosemary, chili powder, I quite enjoy, but I've been having some trouble with heat lately. Garlic powder, onion powder, those are like my staples to use almost every day. So we are going to put some cumin in here. And then also some black pepper and some red chili powder. So interesting that both of these recipes have very similar spices in them. When we're cooking, you know, we can use the spices in different ways and experience them even though they're the same spices, they might taste differently, right? We have them cooked over here, but then raw over here. And then some black pepper.
That I made recently is between garlic and onion powder and garlic salt and onion salt.
Yeah. Yep. As soon as you started talking, I was like, we should probably discuss that.
I accidentally bought onion salt instead of onion powder, and you know, there's actually salt in it.
Yeah,
And increase your self-esteem.
for sure. So for those of you online, we were just chatting about how there is a difference between garlic powder and garlic salt, and similarly onion powder and onion salt. And so it's really important that when you're buying those things, reading those food labels to make sure you're not buying the one with salt in it. All right, so I think we're pretty ready to enjoy here. Maybe just while we're getting serving, I'll have one of us discuss labels.
Yeah.
If anyone, oh, Sadia, I think your computer may be turned off or not.
Question in the chat.
Yeah.
And, my question is about your two recipes, which both report the same nutrition per serving. They have identical amounts of calories, fat, protein, etc. Only difference between the two is potassium.
It's right here.
Yes.
It's on the bottom.
Oh, really?
All right, the same.
Yeah, but I do that and yeah. Yeah. See?
So Shannon's just looking at the recipes to see if
They are different.
Okay.
Tell her.
So I'm not sure which recipe you're looking at, if it's in a PowerPoint or on a piece of paper. They are different, vastly different. So Shannon will post them in the chat, and we'll make sure whatever one you're looking at has the corrected one.
You want to talk about labels?
Yeah, like-
All right, so there was a question in the chat about reading food labels. So we can talk a bit about that. Of course, what you're looking for on food labels is going to depend on your needs, what's important to you, and that's probably going to look a little bit different for each person. So I believe the question was asking about what to look at in terms of calories or potassium, phosphorus, sodium. Is that what I heard?
You did hear that. You did hear that correctly, but there's also another part to the question.
Yeah.
The ingredients in terms of the two recipes today are fairly similar with respect to
Oh, yes.
the minerals. So what makes a difference between the two?
Yes.
I think Emily's already answered that question with regards to taste and stuff. But I think if we approach the how to read the labels in an informed way would be the most important part, at least as I understood the question.
Okay. So the first thing you always want to look at on a food label, does anyone know the first thing you always want to check?
Sugar by
So I heard calorie, sugar, expiry date, all good things. The first thing you always want to check is the serving size, because you need to know what amount of food they're talking about so that you can compare it to what you're actually eating. If it's something like a dry grain, like rice or oat as well, you also want to think about the fact that the serving size they're referring to is most likely dry. So if on this one, we see the serving size is 1/4 of a cup. So that's not 1/4 of a cup of cooked rice. It's 1/4 of a cup dry, which is going to be about half a cup of cooked rice. So check the serving size and then compare that to what you're actually eating. So if this is 1/4 of a cup, but you think, okay, that's a pretty small amount of rice, I'm probably going to eat half a cup. Or maybe you think, oh, that's more rice than I eat, I'm only going to eat less than that. Then you just need to adjust the nutrition. So if it's 1/4 of a cup and I'm eating half a cup, I'm going to multiply everything by 2 to know what I'm eating. Okay. So some people said they check the calories. That's certainly something you can look at. It could be informative to let you know, what, how much of your calories that's taking up. So this is 150 calories for a quarter cup. Is that a little or a lot? I think the answer is that it depends. It depends how much you need. So if you're thinking you need maybe, let's say 2,000 calories in a day, that's a pretty small chunk of what of your entire day's worth. I heard a lot of people say they look at the carbohydrate or the sugar as well. So for people who have these or who are managing their blood sugar, that's probably a good thing to have a look at to see what how much carb you're getting in your meal. When we're looking at the carbohydrate, and some of you may already be doing this, you're going to see different components of it. So it's going to say carbohydrate, and then under that section, it will say fiber and sugar. So sugar is referring to any added sugar. Yeah. So many foods like rice or milk, for example, they contain carbohydrate naturally. However, if they add something like white sugar or honey or glucose syrup or anything to that like that, any added sugars would be listed separately under sugar. If you're counting your carbohydrate or wanting to know how much carbohydrate you're getting in your meal, you also want to look at the fiber. So fiber is a type of carbohydrate, so it's included in that carbohydrate number, but we don't digest fiber like we break down and digest the rest of the carbohydrate. So what that means is that amount of carbohydrate in the fiber, that's not raising your blood sugar. So if you want to know exactly how much carbohydrate is in your meal, you can subtract the fiber. So this per serving is 32 grams carbohydrate, 1 gram fiber. So 31 grams of, you might hear people say net carbohydrate. Other things that I always check on the label is sodium. Most people are paying attention to how much sodium they're getting, and we know a lot of sodium can be added in packaged food. And I believe I heard Emily mention when we're looking at a percentage, we want to aim for maybe about 10% or less. So you'll always see a percentage on the sodium. Anytime we see 5%, we know that's a low sodium food. 15% would be considered a high sodium food. So 5% is low, 15% is high. So if we aim for things that are 10% or less, that's a good kind of a good balance when you're checking the sodium on your labels. I believe the question asked about phosphorus and potassium on labels as well. That one's a little trickier. Most of the time, phosphorus is not labeled on nutrition labels. Put it on the label. Yes. So that comment from the audience is there have been people asking to get phosphorus on nutrition labels because it is very important for people with kidney disease. So right now in Canada, it's not included on nutrition labels, but that could change in the future. If you're someone who needs to reduce the phosphorus in their diet, what can be more helpful is not looking at the nutrition label with the numbers, but actually looking at the ingredient list. And we usually want to avoid foods that contain phosphorus additives. So these are preservatives or flavorings that are added to food. And you heard me talking about bioavailability when I talked about brown rice and whole grains. And I mentioned how whole grains, the phosphorus is not very bioavailable, so you don't absorb it. However, if you're eating a food with a phosphorus additive, so for example, if you see a label and it has an ingredient that says sodium phosphate, that means it contains a preservative, which is made out of phosphate, but that ingredient is very bioavailable. It's probably 100% bioavailable. So that would raise your blood phosphorus number probably more than brown rice. And then lastly, potassium is another one, which we don't always see on nutrition labels because in Canada it's not yet required. I think it's likely coming in the future. In the US, they do require to label potassium. So that's why we may see a change here. So basically, sometimes you will see it and sometimes you won't, which can be a little confusing because if you don't see potassium on a label, that doesn't mean that food doesn't contain potassium. It just means they didn't label it. So that's why it can be helpful to work with your dietitian to understand what foods are higher and lower in potassium. Just like we talked about with calories, what's high potassium, what's low potassium, that can you can use your own particular, budget or requirement. So for example, if you're on a low potassium diet, you might be aiming for about 2,000 milligrams of potassium per day. So for example, this rice has 75 milligrams per serving. That can certainly fit into a low potassium diet. That's fairly low potassium. And most, usually there's a cutoff of about 200 milligrams. If something's less than 200 milligrams per serving, we usually consider that a lower potassium food. How's everything tasting?
Delicious. I haven't tried it yet, so those are the reviews. It's good.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, good. All right, we have a couple minutes for questions. I can't believe that we, all of the renal dietitians put together the content for tonight or today, still daytime out. And so really, I hope this was valuable for you. It was certainly a team effort of all of us. Not everyone could come in person today, just patience to see as well, but we're here to answer your questions. So please put them in the chat. Feel free to rhyme them out. We have a few more minutes.
Is a question.
It's the first time I've ever had coriander in a salad.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful.
I'm glad to hear. Okay.
Someone asked, what are reasonable substitutes for dal?
Oh,
Would
yeah.
that be the beef?
Yeah, so you could certainly do something with chickpeas as opposed to lentils if you wanted. There's there's other types of lentils as well. You could even do, I think you could probably do like a brown, like mixed tofu even in this would be good. Like a crumbled tofu instead of the lentils would also be an option.
There are spices that you use with the dal, like I imagine like curry powder, your chilies, Jamaican allspice.
Yeah, that's a great question. So what other spices could you use in a curry? So, or in a dal, curry powder is often a combination of some of these. I would probably put in things like a bit of coriander as well, like dried coriander if you didn't have the fresh stuff. You could also do the garlic powder, onion powder, or ginger powder if you didn't have any of those. The fresh ingredients.
Garam masala, which I think is a mix.
Yeah, garam masala is a mixture of things like another one would be allspice, possibly would be nice. A little bit of cinnamon might give it some sweetness.
But it's for the turmeric powder too. Turmeric is good for the kidney.
Yeah, turmeric is a great anti-inflammatory as well.
Yeah, most of the time when I took the rice for him, I put a very little bit.
Yeah.
And I put a boil milk, I put a little bit turmeric.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever I make, I put a little bit to my, but he don't know. He know, he said.
Well, now he knows your secret though.
He don't know, we know my.
Now he knows your secret.
But I said no.
So amazing. Are there any other dishes that you would want to learn about or learn to cook?
My question is, okay, lantern and tomato, the cucumber tomato salad.
Yeah.
I don't know, transplant and the person, but like my husband, I never give like this both same time because it's high potassium,
Well, that's why we've provided the nutrition information, right? And so you can always adjust the portion size if it's too much potassium for him for that meal or that day. Right? Instead of, the salad getting 4 portions, maybe you get 6 portions and then have a low potassium vegetable to make up the difference on your plate.
When I cook the dal, any dal, most of the time I cook the regular dal, dal. But I put it like a 1 hour, 2 hour in soap water.
Okay.
And then I boil it 3-4 times. I take the starch out.
Yes, we can soak the lentils and beans and chickpeas, and that helps to reduce the potassium, but we have to soak them for 12 hours. Yeah. Go ahead.
I have a question about all the miracle ingredients that seem to be in a lot of things, which apparently lowers your cholesterol. And then the other is pea protein. It seems to be in a lot of products now.
Yeah, so a question just about some foods that are on the market. So inulin is just a type of fiber. Which is why it's helpful for the cholesterol. Yep. But it can cause a little bit of digestive upset, depending on how much you're having. And then pea protein. So protein powders, depending on where we are in our kidney journey, may or may not be helpful.
Yeah.
Because the kidney still needs to use them and filter them.
How about the quinoa? Can we suggest that we
Yeah, Katie. Sorry, Katie's mid-bite. I'm like, yeah, answer this question. You talked about carbohydrate.
Yeah, so quinoa is definitely a very high fiber whole grain. So it can definitely be included. It is a higher potassium grain. So for those who are restricting potassium, that doesn't mean you can't have it, but maybe you would have a smaller serving than you otherwise would. But it's a really good source of fiber. So yeah, depends on your needs, but that could be definitely substituted for something like rice or even mixed with rice.
Salad, like your salad here, I mix it.
Oh, you mixed it in. Oh, that sounds good. Do you put any like beans in that or something? Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
What's the name of it?
Quinoa.
Oh, quinoa, yeah, I use a lot of quinoa. I make rice and peas, everything.
Yes, with the salad.
Oh. You have one more question?
So just in terms of, traditionally people have 3 meals a day. Usually they're quite big, the breakfast, lunch and dinner. I'm skipping breakfast most of the time. What are your thoughts on eating more from smaller portions more frequently versus larger portions?
Or intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
It really depends. So some people need to eat small, frequent meals. Other people can go, 4 or 6 hours between meals.
Does that help with satiation?
Blood sugar control and satiation for sure.
Yeah.
There's no good evidence that says intermittent fasting is helpful or harmful for individuals with kidney disease. So it's really personal choice. People will say I'm just not hungry in the morning, and so they might not need that. But I always like to explore why aren't you hungry in the morning?
People pre-dialysis may be their appetite's suppressed.
It can be, but we also run the risk of malnutrition if we're not eating enough. So that's the other caveat.
After that, they won't eat,
Yes, and then we make you very hungry once you have the kidney. Yeah.
What about a good breakfast? Like a cereal or a fruit and your taste. And then you don't have lunch at all because you don't feel hungry or anything, but your blood sugar is in check. And then you have a good dinner, but you don't eat after 6 o'clock.
I would worry you weren't eating enough if you were only eating 2 meals a day. But everyone's needs are different, right? And that's why as dietitians, we can kind of give you an estimate of, this is how much protein and calories we think you need a day and help you figure out what will work for your pattern. So I'm happy that you're able to see our faces now. We're living in an environment where we can show those. So make sure you approach us in the clinics and ask us, but it was such a pleasure to be here and work. I mean, we work with each other every day, but this was like a very nice opportunity for each of us to collaborate together to support you. Yeah, we're all here, some in this building, some across the street.
I know, you get it.
Well, Carol, yes, Carol is a very popular diet.
Oh, yeah. I can call anytime, I leave the message anyone. Even I call Saturday, Sunday, I leave the message, she call me next week, Monday. And I want to ask something.
Amazing. I think that there is probably a garbage somewhere down.
I think they have.
Yeah, it's right here, so we'll collect things, but thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Yes, we want to thank you guys for being here today. It's great. Every other month, we're actually going to have a guest speaker here for you guys. So the next one's going to be a social worker talking about mental health. So, and then after that, we're going to have our lovely, another social worker, Sharon, and she'll be talking about another topic. So you'll get the emails from Julia, who's right back there. So you can actually be Julia, send the emails. But before you guys leave, if you could just give Julia your name so we can check you off our registration list. We know that you joined. But thank you again for coming out from Mississauga and other places. It's amazing. And from St. Mike's. But please reach out to us anytime you need anything. Obviously, like your support or anything like that. And these lovely ladies in the back as well. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We're gonna log off. I think. So
I'm up in,
yeah, so we're just saying, Sadia will be sending the recording out, and we'll have our next event in 2 months, which a social worker will be chatting.
oh, yeah, yeah. I know.
You actually did.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Bye bye.
Thank you for coming.
So.
I'm giving all six. Yeah, sorry. I think we'll probably have a post, Erwin, we'll probably talk about this later.
Okay.
I mean, like, yeah, because it's just a social gathering now.
Fair enough.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Bye-bye now.
You know, I couldn't make mine main screen. I guess if Sadia pins hers, I can't override her pinning.
I guess.
I don't,
It's
we'll
beyond
find out
my,
later.
it's beyond my technical certification.
Yeah, okay. Thanks a lot, my
Keep
friend.
well. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Yeah, no worries. Yeah.